a drama, Doll's House, written by Ibsen. Doll's House, written by Henrik Johan Ibsen. Henrik Johan Ibsen, a Doll's House, a drama written by Ibsen. Henrik Johan Ibsen. So before proceeding with the detailed analysis of the play Doll's House, uh, this unit introduces into the author of the play. So Henrik Johan Ibsen was lived in between 1828 and 1906. He is a Norwegian poet and dramatist. He is generally recognized as one of the most influential playwrights of 19th century. He has also been a great influence on the dramatic writings of 20th century. Ibsen, Henrik Johan Ibsen, started writing poetry at the age of 19 and completed his first play, Cataline, a tragedy in blank verse, in which he was only 22. After a after a year, he was offered the stage management of the newly established Norwegian theatre at Bergen. He also directed plays and learned much of dramatic technique during this period. Ibsen became the center of a controversy in Norway and Denmark after the publication of one of his plays, Love's Comedy, in 1862. The play criticizes the contemporary society, its reflection on marriage. If you want to marry, don't be in love. If you love, part. So enraged the public when it appeared, but the work successfully withstood the public criticism and is popular in Norway even today. His best plays are The Pretenders, Brand, Peer, Sint, Pillars Society, Pillars Society, A Doll's House, Ghost, An Enemy of the People, and Edda Gabler. Ibsen's international reputation dates from the publication and productions of A Doll's House in 1879. Ibsen suffered a paralytic stroke in 1901 and died at the age of 78. Died at the age of 78. Ibsen today regarded as a key figure of the evolution of modern Scandinavian literature. His importance was exerted influence of Germany and France in the last quarter of the 19th century in England and America. His influence was widespread in the period immediately before the First World War at the end of the 19th century. When the in the first good translation of his works appeared in English, his plays generated tremendous social and literary controversy. Ibsen became the rage of the day, and the Ibsenism was worth fighting for. He was the first and perhaps the only dramatist to achieve this kind of reputation. Bernard Shaw published his Quintessence of Ibsenism In 1891, to other Ibsenities, Ibsen was above all a great moral teacher. Great moral teacher. And in 1889, when Ibsen was at 61, he met and fell in love with an 18 years old girl. He did not see her again, but they corresponded for a year. The event had some effect on his later plays. In the same year, a Doll's House was staged in London, the first major English speaking production of Ibsen from this time till he suffered a paralytic stroke in 1901. Ibsen wrote five plays: Edda Gabler, The Master Builder, Little Eeyore, John Gabriel Borkman, and When We Did Awaken. The last four is Norway. He was dead at the age of 78. 78. So now we go through the structure of the play. So Doll's House is one of the best known plays of Ibsen. The play came as a shock on his contemporaries because Nora Elmer, the heroine, leaves her husband and children to assert her rights as an individual. The play perhaps aroused greater enthusiasm to improve the social condition of women in Europe and America than on any other literary work in others. The first act of the play is significant in several ways. It is not only introduces all the important characters, but also ends the central issue of the play quite early. We learn that the crucial issue in the story is money. Nora is economically dependent on her husband. She looks forward to receiving a year pay check of her husband. It is to mobilize money that she forgets her father. That she forgets her father. So now I am going to explain the structure of events. Structure of events to the play. Nora appears to be happy with her husband, the lawyer Torvald Elmer. Nora appears to be happy with her husband, lawyer Torvald, and their three children, two sons and a daughter. When the play begins, it is Christmas Eve, and Nora has returned home after doing her Christmas shopping. The affectionate exchanges between her and her husband suggest that they are still very much in love after 8 years of marriage. It is clear, though, that Elmer thinks Nora is rather careless with his money. She is elated because he has recently been appointed manager of a bank. Elmer points out that it will be 3 months before the first paycheck comes in. An old friend of the Elmers, Dr. Rank, who visits them every day, calls and is conducted to Elmer's room. At the same time, an old friend of Nora's, Mrs. Christine Linde, whose husband had died 3 years earlier, arrives to seek assistance from Nora in finding a job. Nora tells her of Elmer's illness some years ago, which required a stay in a warmer climate. The trip was made possible by Nora, who claimed to have obtained the money from her father. She confesses that she had actually got it as a loan from someone else without her husband's knowledge and was repaying it in installments and with interest from her household allowance and from the money she earned on the side by copying documents. An employee of the bank, Niels Krogstad, comes in at this point to meet Elmer, and Mrs. Linde recognizes him as an old acquaintance. Now a widower, when Dr. Rank emerges from Elmer's study and talks to Nora and Mrs. Linde, he refers to Krogstad as rotten to the core. A little later, Elmer comes in and thanks he can provide Mrs. Linde with a job in the bank. Then he goes out accompanied by Mrs. Linde and Dr. Rand. And Dr. Rand. Crockstead returns when Nora is playing with the children and reveals that Elmer intends to give him the sack. He asks Nora to prevent this under threat of telling her husband that the loan she has taken is from him against an IOU, a signed statement that owes, she owes him his money, for which her father was supposed to be the security. Now Crackstead suspects that Nora's father had died before signing as security and that she had forged his signature. Nora admits this without realizing the legal implication. Crackstead tells her that his own offense for which he had ruined his reputation was the same that Nora had committed if he produced it in court the document on which Nora had forged her father's signature. She could be condemned according to the same laws which had condemned him. He had done it to save the life of his wife, for whose treatment in an illness the money was needed, just as Nora had done it to raise money for the Elmer's stay in the south. Krogstad leaves Elmer, comes back and guesses what Krogstad has been up to without knowing that Nora is in the same position as Krogstad. He describes the latter's crime and its moral consequences. He has decided to sack Krogstad because he feels physically sick in the presence of such people. Krogstad, according to Elmer, exaggerated moral revulsion, has corrupted his children and poisoned his home. The first act ends with Nora wondering whether she is responsible for the same effect on her home and children. The next day, Nora prepares to attend a fancy dress party upstairs tomorrow evening in the apartment of their friend, the Sternborg. Elmer wants her to do so as a Neapolitan Fisher lass, and so to dance the tarantella. Mrs. Linde calls and Nora tells her, among other things, that Rank has tuberculosis of the spine because of his father's moral corruption. Mrs. Linde suspects that there is more to Nora's relationship with Dr. Rank than appears on the surface. We gather Nora has confessed to Mrs. Linde that the loan was from Crackstead. Nora is afraid Crackstead will write to Elmer about it. She tries to persuade Elmer not to sack Crackstead, but Elmer tells her he is going to give Crackstead's job to Mrs. Linde. He has an additional reason for wanting to sack Crackstead. They were friends when younger, and Crackstead treats him with excessive familiarity. When Nora rightly calls this pretty Elmer is provoked and sends a fractured notice to him immediately. Notice to him immediately. So Elmer returns to study and Nora has a talk with Dr. Rank, who has reason to think he is going to die soon. When he is certain of this, he will send Nora's visiting card with a black cross on it. Nora hears from him that he has been in love with her all these years. Rockstead visits Nora again and says he intends to keep her IOU. IOU means sign statement that she owns of the money and use this to make Elmer and give him a better job in the bank. Eventually, as his assistant, if Nora tries to prevent this, she may pay the price with her life. As Krogstad leaves, he drops a letter to Elmer in the letterbox. Nora tells Mrs. Linde about his letter and wants her to testify should it become necessary that Nora was responsible for the whole thing. Mrs. Linde offers to persuade Krogstad to ask for the letter back unread, but it turns out that Krogstad has left to town and is expected to return only the following evening. Mrs. Linde leaves a note for him. When the second act ends, Elmer has not yet read Krogstad's letter. In Act 3, in Act 3, Krogstad meets Mrs. Linde in the Elmer apartment, and we learn that the two were once engaged to be married. Mrs. Linde had married another man for his money. In the interest of her helpless mother and two young brothers, now she is a widow, Krogstad a widower, and both are merely clinging to the wreckage of their lives. She asked him, Nils, what about his two outweigh castaways joining forces? Paxted accepted this offer and wants to take back his letter to Elmer, but Mrs. Linde prefers the whole business to come out into the open. All this secrecy and deception, she argues, it just cannot go on. Nora and Elmer return home after the party upstairs and meet Mrs. Linde, who tells Nora to make a full confession to Elmer. She is unwilling to do so. Elmer opens the letterbox and finds two of Rank's visiting cards with the black cross above his name among the letters. Nora explains to him the meaning of that message, and Elmer retires to his room to read this letter. Nora quickly prepares to get out of the house, but in the meanwhile, Elmer has read Comsted's letter and confronts her with it. He calls her a hypocrite, a liar, worse than a criminal. He thinks he must push up the matter at all costs and also keep up appearances between husband and wife. So at this point, a note from Cockstead for Nora is delivered to her, delivered to her, which Elmer reads first. It informs her that he regrets what he has done and returns her IOU. Elmer is delighted tears of both the note and IOU and offers to give Nora everything. She, on the other hand, is ironical about this forgiveness, blames Elmer for never understanding her and accuses Elmer of not truly loving her. You only thought, she says, how nice it was to be in love with me. First her father and then Elmer. She insist treated her as a doll, a plaything, and not allowed her to make anything of her life. She had not been happy, only gay. She had been to Elmer, only a doll wife, rejecting Elmer's offer to make a difference thereafter. She announces her intention to give him. He pleads with her and then makes various accusations against her, but Nora reaffirms her decision. She will not even see her children again, not permit Elmer to write to her or send her help. I don't accept things from strangers. Elmer hears the door being slammed behind her. His son changes the closing lines for the German production, in which Nora relents when Elmer points out that their children would become motherless. Later, Ibsen returned to the original ending of the play. It stands now with Nora's departure. Nora's departure. So the first act of the play is significant in several ways. It not only introduces all the important characters but also hints at the central issue of the play. Quite early, we learn that the crucial issue in the story is money. Nora is economically dependent on her husband. She looks forward to receiving a higher pay check of her husband. It is to mobilize money that she forgets her father's signature. So during the 8 years of marriage, she has experienced nothing to reality but the warmth and protection of a married life. This brings in the theme of male domination. The act also brings out the contrast between the husband and wife. Elmer is portrayed as a man having his own masculine ideals. He is conscious of his reputation and hates leaving behind his means. Nora, on the contrary, is childish, extravagant, flirtatious, and impulsive. Christine forms a sharp contrast to her. The end of the act is a foreboding of Nora's confrontation with the harsh realities of life. The tragedy of modern women begins to overshadow the dramatic plot. At this moment, we feel more concerned with the status of North Nora and with her forgery. Nora is no longer a doll. She begins to think on the immediate issues of her life, and so does the reader. Our interest in the plot is kept up by this technique. Parallelism is suggested between Nora and Crackstead in terms of their illegal acts. A parallel is again drawn between Dr. Rank and Crockstead. Both are sick, the former physically and the latter morally. So the play is a problem play since it deals with certain urgent problems of contemporary society. So in the first act, So the action of the play takes place in Elmer's flat in a typical Norwegian town. The play begins with a tinge symbolism which is quite apparent in Ibsen's works. Although he is called a realist in drama, the root cause of the whole problem in the story is money. As the curtain goes up, we met Nora Hilmer, a middle class housewife and the protagonist of the play. It is Christmas Eve and Nora went in shopping. She overtips the porter who has helped her carry home for Christian purchases. Christmas purchases. Nora's status and financial recklessness are indicated by the heavy tip she gives the porter. Her husband Torvald Elmer treats her in an affectionate and a condescending manner. He calls her by poet names such as My Little Skylar, My Little Squirrel, My Little Singing Bird, etc. However, he is put out by the fact that she has been spending money rather recklessly, chiding her for her excessive spending. Elmer says, "What a funny little one you are, just like your father, always on the lookout for money wherever you cannot lay hands on it. But as soon as you have got it, just seems to slip through your fingers. You never seem to know what you have done with it. It's in the blood." Nora so far impresses us only as a pampered darling who lives in a doll's house. She, however, reminds her husband that this is the first Christmas in many years when they can afford to be extravagant. He has just been made manager of a bank. Once he takes over his new job after the new year, their financial problems will be over. She even encourages borrowing from the others in the meantime. The idea is disgusting to Thorvald, who believes in the motto, no debts, never borrow to him. There is always something unpleasant about a home built on a credit and borrowed money. When she looks discouraged by his sermon, he relents, but urges his little lark not to be careless with money in future. But the little sweet tooth breaks the rules of her husband and buys liberally from the confectioner's shop. Nora denies the charge and denies the charges and changes the topic of their conversation to decorating the Christmas tree. But the audience has already seen her crunching macarons and hiding the bag from the notice of her husband. We see her enacting the role of a sweet, pampered child that her husband expects her. But as the play progresses, her character develops and gradually she emerges as the real backbone of the family. So the maid announces the arrival of a Christine Linde, an old school friend of Nora. Torvald goes to his study as Dr. Rank, an old family friend, is waiting for him. It is 10 years since the women last saw each other. The plunge in a friendly chat, Mrs. Linde is a childless widow and has nothing in the world, not even a broken heart to grieve over. It seems she married unlovingly for the sake of money, as she had a sick mother and two young brothers to look after. Her husband passed away 3 years ago, and she was left alone to experience the hardship of life. She has come to the town in the hope of finding some suitable employment. Nora assures her that she will recommend Christine's case to her husband and get her position at his bank. Miseries of life have aged Christine much more before time, while Nora is still an innocent and childlike as she was during her school days. When Christine speaks with pride and about her sacrifice, Nora boasts that she too has something to be proud of, even though everyone considers her childish and irresponsible. Nora reveals that some years ago, when Torvald's life depends upon his holiday trip to Italy, and when they had no money, it was Nora who borrowed money for the trip. Mrs. Linde finds the disclosure rather startling. Read the following conversation. So Nora does not want her husband to know that she saved his life. She kept it secret and told him that the money was borrowed from her father just before the latter death. She also tells Lindes how she has had a difficult time saving the sum to repay the loan. She would buy herself the cheapest clothes and take up copying the work at night just to earn extra money. Mrs. Linde is shocked that Nora has not mentioned the matter of her husband in all these years. Nora explained that he would never consent to borrowing money, as she says, good heavens, how could you ever imagine such thing when he is so strict about such matters? Besides, Torvald is a man with good deal of pride. It would be terribly embarrassing and humiliating for him if he owed anything to me. It would spoil everything between us. This happy from home of ours would never be the same again. Here, the statement of Nora suggests that she is not as a childish as she appears to be. However, she fails to convince Mrs. Linde, who still surprised, asks further, are you never going to tell him? Oh, yes, someday, perhaps in many years' time, when I am no longer as pretty as I am now, when Torvald is not quite so much in love with me as he is now, when he's lost interest in watching me dance or get dressed up or recite, then it might be a good thing to have something in reserve. Answers Nora, although her confession is meant to impress her friend, Mrs. Linde is far from convinced. She realizes no Nora Elmer marriage is based upon the deception and may not last long. May not last long. So at the end of the act, first the plot become thick. Then the psychological element enters the dramatic action. Elmer shacks and bewilders Nora by telling her that a lying mother corrupts her children. To quote these words, a fog of lies like that in a household, and it spreads diseases and infection into every part of it. So every breath the children take in that kind of house is wrecking with evil germs. The act ends with Nora refusing to see her children. Elmer's words reverberance in her ears, and she repeats, corrupt my children, poison my home. It's not true. It would never, never be true. The end of the act leaves Nora crestfallen. It forebodes her confrontation with the hardship of life. During all these 8 years, she has experienced nothing of reality but the warmth and protection of a married life. Mrs. Linde forms a sharp contrast to her. The tragedy of modern women begins to overshadow the dramatic plot at this moment. We feel more concerned with the status of Nora in relation to the masculine ideals of her husband than with her forgery. However, the interest in the plot does not disappear. Ibsen arouses suspense and excitement by using traditional techniques. One such technique is carefully timed entrance and exit of characters. The textual analysis of Act 1 comes to an end here, and that the once again remind the pay particular attention to the textual details. So, and try to find out the other important lines of the work in the better understanding of the central issue of the play. Central issue of the play. So, it is about the summary and analysis of the first act. Tomorrow, we are discussing second act and critical comments. We will discussing, continue and discussing tomorrow. Okay, bye. See you.